Politics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we are going to be talking about the Billy Meyer case for the first hour, and then we'll be talking about immigration and overpopulation with Frosty Wooldridge the second hour. In this first hour, I'm going to cover Reincarnation, talk about Might, a book called Might of the Thoughts by Edward Albert Meyer. I'm going to talk about the creational natural laws. I'm going to read just a little bit from the Psyche, a little bit from the Goblet of Truth, and I'm going to talk a little about constructive and destructive interference. And of course, if you listen to this show, you know who Edward Albert Meyer is again. But in case we have a few new listeners, plus it's always good to repeat. I like to just talk a little bit at the beginning of the show about Billy, who he is, according to the Meyer information. Of course, some of this stuff does sound, I don't even want to use the word outrageous or outlandish, because if you look at the world through a particular point of view, this could sound very strange. From after spending so many years in this material, I think you certainly change your point of view. Edward Albert Meyer, he's 81 years old. One of the things that is so different and unique about Billy, besides being a contactee, his spirit form is 9.6 billion years old. Now, the typical human being on the earth today, if I remember what it says correctly in the book The Psyche, is about 4 to 5 million years old in terms of their spirit form. And the spirit form is our spiritual consciousness. It's who we are in terms of all the accumulated lifetimes. The Meyer information says we do have many, many reincarnations. We never repeat a personality. Every personality we come in with is different. The spirit form is the same. The spirit form is a tiny fragment of what's called the universal consciousness. The universal consciousness doesn't coincide with the notion of God. The religions teach the term and the idea of God. What is the difference between creation and God? First of all, they use the term God the Father. And if you look at the history of the earth, you can see that there really isn't a God figure up there. For example, what I'm trying to say is a father interferes, stops his children from destroying themselves. But we do not have that happening in our reality. For example, we had 60 million people killed in World War II. There was no father that stepped in to stop that. We've let off 2,000 nuclear bombs in testing. What that has done to our atmosphere is just beyond belief. There was no heavenly father that stepped in to stop that. Now, there may have been a few ETs over some of our ICBM stations that stepped in and stopped those things from creating a global Armageddon, if that's possible. I've heard that talked about. But if you look, for example, if you climb up to the top of the Empire State Building, and if the police don't stop you, and if you jump off that thing, the law of gravity is going to pull you down to the ground. You're going to splat on the sidewalk or on a car or on something. You're going to die. You're going to be dead. You're going to be like a bug splattered. Well, the reason for that is the universal consciousness is very neutral. It radiates love, but it's not the kind of love that you and I think about. You know, the universal consciousness it creates human spirit forms in order to aid in its own evolution. That's the other difference between the idea of the universal creation, is that it's evolving. It is learning. There is no Heavenly Father up there that knows everything and is all-powerful. What there is a universal consciousness, and it creates these human spirit forms. And the spirit form evolves independently through a human being's material consciousness. So this is a fundamental thing to understand. We have a material consciousness and a spiritual consciousness. The spiritual consciousness never dies. The material consciousness does die, and it is absorbed into the spirit form after the life is over. The spirit form is totally neutral, and it exists in a timeless existence. The goal of the spirit form is to collect wisdom and knowledge. So as we go through these countless reincarnations, the spirit form is absorbing all kinds of wisdom. And that wisdom comes from impulses from our material consciousness. So your material consciousness is the human brain, the cerebrum. It personifies the human. So our material consciousness is where decision-making is, all of our thought processes, all of our considerations, our deliberations, our speculations. So the creation, what I'm trying to say is the creation, this universal consciousness, is not some man that's standing in judgment. It's genderless. It is the source of everything in our universe. And about 46 trillion years ago, it experienced the Big Bang. So the Big Bang also involved something else called the creation, which is a higher level creation than our creation. But I don't want to get into that at this point. So the Big Bang was the beginning of our universe. It occurred 46 trillion years ago. And we have a parallel universe to our universe. It's called the Tao universe. It's where one of Billy's other mentors came from, Ask It, who I kind of wanted to talk about today, but when I started to get into it, for some reason I didn't follow that path. I didn't feel like that was where we should go today. But the creation is the source of everything. It's genderless, and it experienced the Big Bang about 46 trillion years ago. And at that point, it started to create the galaxies, the stars, and the planets, all the material in the material belt of our universe. And we're 46 trillion years into 155 trillion year expansion phase. So our universe will continue to expand for 155 trillion years, which is a length of time so far beyond what we can even imagine. I can't even really describe it to you. So 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg, the spirit form leaves the spirit realm and brings a new material consciousness, and it enters into the human being, which is only 21 days old. And the goal here is for it to collect wisdom, knowledge, and love through countless reincarnations. And eventually the spirit form will merge back with creation. After billions of years, it will merge back with creation. And there are seven stages where our bodies change and the spirit form changes, and all these evolutionary steps. And the Pleiaren, Billy's contacts, are several levels up from us in the evolutionary steps. And let me read something from one of Billy's books called the Decalogue. And it describes the creation this way. And I'll just read this to you. And I will be honest, I don't understand everything that this says. But I think it will maybe spur some thought. If it only affects your subconscious only, it still is good. The creation is the being and the non-being of life. It is the most immense mass of spiritual energy in the universe. It is spirit in its purest form, and unmeasurable in its wisdom, knowledge, love, harmony, and truth. And one of the things to keep in mind here, unmeasurable. So we have no way to measure the wisdom of the creation. We also, I don't think we really can measure its size. And we try to discuss its age in terms of time, but really these are time frames that are way beyond our comprehension. So it is pure spiritual intelligence, and the creation prevails overall. It stands in an unstoppable evolution, and that's something that jolted me and went deep into my subconscious, is that the evolution of the creation is unstoppable. It's a juggernaut. It doesn't have a namby-pamby human personality. It can't afford that. It has to be a juggernaut that for centuries and millions of years and billions of years and trillions of years continues to evolve. But it does have love. And it's very interesting that the creation has wisdom and love. Wisdom and love go together. And the creation and its laws are wisdom and love at the same time. Now there is a storage bank in the spirit realm, and this storage bank is called the overall consciousness block. And my understanding is that this is actually created by your spirit form. So everyone in the spirit realm, for all the spirit forms that are in the material right now, in the spirit realm in your area, there is something called the overall consciousness block. And when your spirit form leaves your body in the death process, your consciousness is going to go into this overall consciousness block. And it will be dissolved, and a new one will be built up. So the overall consciousness block, it creates and it programs a new personality. So you're going to get a new personality in your next life. The new personality, you'll have a new consciousness, you'll have a new material consciousness. So again, 21 days after conception, the spirit form and your new material consciousness enters into the body of the child, and its heart starts to beat. Now the spirit form goes into the area of your brain called the superior colliculus, and it'll spread its energy throughout all of the body, the whole body, and your heart will start to beat. Now, the strange and interesting thing about the spirit form is that it enters within the human, but it remains in its own realm. And it will not be influenced by anything in the material world. Not disease, not sickness, not anything. The spirit form is invulnerable. And this is one of the first things that the book, The Psyche, talks about. And let me read a little bit here. And now we're talking about the difference between the spirit and the material consciousness. And the spirit itself is a minute part piece of creation. The German word is Telstock. It's a noun. And the human being is being animated by a tiny speck of the creational spirit of the universe. And the spirit form can in no form be disturbed or somehow negatively affected by the material realm. It cannot be. The spirit can also not be nourished from anything out of the material realm. The material consciousness realm, the material consciousness itself, can indeed become disturbed. Now, here is the two aspects of man. We have a material consciousness which can become disturbed. And the more you study the might of your own thoughts, you're going to realize how easily it is for your consciousness to be disturbed. And it's really interesting because when your consciousness is not operating, the subconscious tends to take over. For example, if you're driving a car and you start thinking about something, you don't immediately crash, which is a good thing. Your subconsciousness takes over because you've learned subconsciously how to drive a car, and particularly if you're driving in a place where you drive a lot. So the subconsciousness takes over. Now, and you're under the influence of the subconscious. Well, you have a lot of negativity in your subconscious. We all do. And particularly, for example, when you sleep, the consciousness turns off, the subconscious takes over. So I always wake up in the morning, and it's a struggle to correct my thinking because the programmed negativity of the subconscious, and we're talking about vulnerability here. The material consciousness is vulnerable, and it's going to express that vulnerability to you, and that's why you have to arm yourself with. What I do is I arm myself with the whole things from the Might of Thoughts book, which tells me I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm relaxed, I'm cheerful, I'm enthusiastic, I'm the master of my own destiny, the forger of my own fortune, the creator of my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift on the ocean of life. I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. It is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone every conceivable thing can be brought to fruition, okay? I say that a lot, but your material consciousness can indeed become disturbed. So arm yourself with the things that will bring your material consciousness back to neutral positive thinking. Contrary to the unvulnerable and untouchable spirit, your spirit form it will never be disturbed. So one of the struggles, what we're trying to do here is to have our outer self conform to the innermost creational personality. And that's called an evolutive attitude. And Billy talks about that in the Might of Thoughts book. Let me continue here. Contrary to the unvulnerable and untouchable spirit, which represents a purely creational product in its form and power, as well as its swinging wave, we have something called the swinging wave, which is part of what's related to the power of the might of thoughts. And we have this swinging wave, and Billy talks about it in terms of nature and what happens in nature. Because, the plants have a spirit form, the animals have a spirit form, the human beings have a spirit form. And from your thinking, I think the swinging wave is related to your material consciousness as well. But the power of the thoughts is the most incredible thing. The spirit form, though, again, will not be affected. Even if you lost an arm, for example, your spirit form would not be affected. It wouldn't be hurt. The spirit form is unable to become influenced by the material world. It cannot experience sickness or disease. Now, your material consciousness and your ego is definitely vulnerable. So, the material consciousness is what is learning from the lifetime. Your personality, you're doing independent research. You consciously learn and you process results. And so while you're living your material life, you're getting what's called evolutive values. And these evolutive values can be your ability to analyze things, your ability to make decisions. It can be your confidence, your optimism, your ability to remain relaxed under pressure. These are your evolutive values. Now they're transferred. These evolutive values are transferred in an impulse-based form from material consciousness to the spiritual consciousness. And eventually the spirit form will further process these, and it will store them in itself, these evolutive values, for all time. So, and this is what occurs in the spirit realm. The spirit form grows in energy as it's getting all of these evolutive values from your material consciousness. It becomes wiser, it becomes more knowing, and so these neutral positive impulses, I think they go back and forth from material consciousness in the spirit form. So the spirit form is ultimately getting these evolutive values, which are transferred in this impulse-based form from material consciousness into the spiritual consciousness. So these evolutive values that are timeless, they are things like love, wisdom, harmony. It's the purest kind of knowledge. Let me repeat that. Your evolutive values are your purest kind of knowledge. This is the purpose of your life. It comes from these evolutive values. Okay. Now when you die, when an animal dies, when a plant dies, something similar happens. But let me focus on the human being. Your consciousness and your spirit form retreat out of the body, and they go back to the spirit realm. And there's a process which takes place, and these evolutive values are transformed into the spirit form. So your material consciousness goes into the storage bank called the overall consciousness block. And when that happens, it happens quickly. Boom, the spirit form goes out, which is the energy powering your body. And it's always, you'll notice that whenever it occurs. If you're looking at an animal or a human being, you can just see it. The spirit form leaves, material consciousness leaves. Boom, it's gone. And there's nothing left but the physical body. So the brain activity stops. Your consciousness, your material consciousness, goes into the overall consciousness block in the spirit realm. And your consciousness and personality are dissolved and stored. This overall consciousness block will create a new material consciousness and a new personality. The personality is never repeated, but the spirit form always comes back. So every time you reincarnate, we're not stuck in the same old patterns. We get a new personality, and you're unburdened by the past, unless you come in too soon. And we hopefully will have time to talk about this. I didn't realize this was going to take quite this long, but that's okay. So the spirit form reincarnates during each life. So, and you start out in your new life with your level of consciousness evolution. You start off where your last personality left off in terms of your evolution. And there are various levels of these consciousness forms. I talked about love and respect. These are examples of consciousness forms. Now, the highest level of each of these consciousness forms are called essences. So the highest level of these consciousness forms that you've learned, they're programmed into your subconscious. So you've got some good things in your subconscious, but a lot of garbage too. The subconscious is like this machine, this very, very powerful machine. I've heard Dr. Bruce Lipton talk about this. So these are programmed into your subconsciousness of the new personalities. So right now we're in the spirit realm, and the spirit form and this overall consciousness block are getting prepared for another reincarnation. So these evolutive values, things like love, wisdom, logic, discernment, they're stored in these essences, and they're programmed into the subconsciousness. And again, these consciousness forms are love, honesty, respect, patience, diligence, and even humor, which I thought was very, very interesting. And these essences are programmed into the subconsciousness of the new personality. So eventually, you're going to reincarnate. Your spirit form is going to reincarnate. Once it creates, with the overall consciousness block, it creates a new personality. Now, we have something called the planetary storage banks. And there's a unique frequency associated with things in the storage banks. So other egos and consciousness forms can be accessed if you create the same frequency. As far as I know, I've never done that. Now, one other thing that happens is you have certain problems. I have certain problems. We have certain issues. Certain negative thought patterns, which are actually stored in those storage banks, that we call up. Oh, what a nightmare. They keep coming back. So, just keep that in mind. This is one of our challenges. So, we also have what are called fluidal forces, or electromagnetic vibrations. So it'd be very interesting to learn to, or if we ever have technology that could film these fluidal forces. I would love to film the fluidal forces of certain musicians particularly. I bet they just literally emit all this energy. And, okay, so these fluidal electromagnetic vibrations, they store themselves in watches and clothing, in the walls of your house. Will absorb these energies. That's why cremation is bad, because your skeleton also contains the fluidal energies. They're almost like a memory. And you can, these fluidal energies, they're a back connection to your previous personality. So, for example, if even the heart, your physical heart, has fluidal energies, so if you allow your heart to be transplanted into someone else, they're going to get some of those fluidal energies, which are going to affect their thoughts. So, quickly, let me talk a little bit about the side effects of leaving the spiritual realm too early. That's a side effect of overpopulation. And we talk about overpopulation in the last hour. So, this is what's going on the unseen side. The new consciousness and the new personality leave the spirit realm, sometimes only after a very short time. I've heard in as little as half an hour. That is rare. That would be a nightmare. So when someone reincarnates too soon, they receive strong impulses of remembrances of the earlier personality. And these are when kids can tell and talk about details. And I often talk about the pilot, the kid that was a pilot in World War II. I forget his name. I have to look the book up. I should have bought the book a long time ago. He was a Corsair pilot. He was on a small aircraft carrier called the Potomac Bay. He remembered the names of the other pilots that he flew with. He remembered being hit by AAA fire. He remembered when his airplane caught on fire and he burned up. So these strong impulses of remembrances tend to make world news. Now, this wasn't genetic memory that I've just described to you, because it wasn't his father or his grandfather that died as a Corsair pilot. There were no pilots in their family, that I know of, that I ever heard of. So these individuals will retain memories of the previous life, and this happens because there wasn't enough time in between reincarnations, and there's a strong connection to the previous material existence. So I think the time we spend in the spirit realm, it helps us to let go of these difficult issues of the previous life. Otherwise, our new personality tends to hold on, or somewhere it's affected by impulses. So maybe the new personality is close to the same frequency of the old personality. I'm just speculating. So overpopulation means that the work of the comprehensive consciousness block does not have enough time to finish dissolving the old personality and completing the new personality. This lack of time keeps up a connection to the old personality. So the new personality isn't even completely programmed. The spirit form is first forced to reincarnate too soon. This includes the new material consciousness could have weakness. It'll be non-thorough. It'll have instability. It can affect interpersonal relations. It can affect the planet in itself. Human beings tend to suffer from certain ailments and problems. They have a softness. They're prone to drug addiction if they come back too soon. Like, for example, in an ideal situation, if you lived 100 years, you would be in the spirit realm 152 years. That's a century and a half. So when you reincarnate, the world is totally different. So there's not enough time to program the new personality. This causes an instability in the new personality. The person is likely to need more support from the parents. They're more prone to addiction. Masculinity doesn't have enough time to form. And for some reason, the cycles never return, even if the population comes back down. There's some disturbance that's permanent. So I don't know all of that, what's associated with that. So supposedly there's 129 billion spirit forms that have been activated. Okay. So, wow, I spent a lot more time on that than I thought I would. That was from a great movie by Michael Udebrook, who took one of Billy's books and translated them into English and then did a movie on it. It's on YouTube. Look, I don't know, Michael Udebrook. Look for Reincarnation in the Spirit Form. Look for Billy Meyer. You'll find these things, hopefully. On page 224, in the Might of Thoughts, I want to talk for just hopefully a few minutes about a passage that I continue to study on and off. It goes like this. It says, "This is a contrast to entangled ideas confuse the thoughts and abruptly go from one extreme to another, whereby a misdirection of the thoughts arises, which triggers emotions and can even lead to manslaughter and murder." So, tangled ideas, IDEAS, these are notions which you haven't completely contemplated, you haven't thought them through, you may think you have, but if you have some issue that triggers you, what we're talking about is being triggered. So if there's an issue that triggers you, that means you have tangled ideas about it. Your thoughts are confused. You will not be triggered if you're neutral positive. So think about that. So even if you're right, you may not be completely developed in that concept. So you need to be neutral positive and go back. Okay. The problem is these tangled ideas, people get caught up in them and they can't free themselves from them. So I think there's a certain amount of repeating that the psyche does, that the thought pattern does, over and over and over. And this is an example of unhealthy psyche. Oh boy, I've been there. I certainly have done that in the past. I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. So this stuff works, but you got to stick with it. Oh, you got to stick with it over and over and over again. So when you start to get tangled up in these ideas which aren't completely developed, your thoughts are not organized. They are tangled. And when your thoughts get tangled, there can be a frantic behavior. Let me tell you a story. I had my Bose earphones out today, and the cord kind of was going everywhere. I have a real long cord on it. And one of my cats got tangled up in it, okay? And he took off, dragging the earphones across my furnished basement here. I think he ran up the stairs. Finally he came loose. But that's a perfect example of a tangled ideas. It created a frantic behavior in my cat. Well, we do the same thing. And Billy traces the cause and effect that takes place in our mind. He says that tangled ideas confuse the thoughts. Cause, tangled ideas, effect, confusion of the thoughts. The thoughts go abruptly to extremes is the cause. The effect is the misdirection of thoughts. The cause is the triggering of emotions, and the effect is murder or manslaughter. And I think this is what's going on now. More and more people are being triggered this way, particularly on the left. So I'm sure it happens on the right as well. It happens everywhere. Everything has its order, determined through information, which manifests through the law of causality, meaning cause and effect. So, again, what are these tangled ideas? They are twisted, matted, confused, jumbled, mixed up, messy, chaotic thoughts. Tangled can mean to bring together into a mass of interlace, intertwisted threads. It means a snarl. Have your thoughts ever been that way? Mine have. It's an untidy mass of things. When we are confused, we cannot think clearly. Usually you're angry. We're bewildered. Our consciousness is disordered. We have a loss of linear thinking. Not a good time to play chess. Not a good time for computer programming. You won't be able to play music either if you're angry. There's no linear thinking. The thoughts, they go from one extreme to another, love to hate, hate to love. There's a misdirection of the thoughts, and there's probably a whole study under the idea of a misdirected thought. I don't know what that is completely yet. I have an inkling, because it's the state of your thoughts just before the emotions are triggered. And I believe the German word for triggering is auslösen. And it's we get triggered. So, and this is what I'm starting, I've come back and started to study again, is there is no room for rationality in these virtueless, tangled ideas. So that's the trouble that we have. There is no room for rationality. Only emotion is governed. So our thoughts are governed by emotions, highly intense emotions in this state. You cannot do a setting of the zeal. You cannot do a life determination. Your linear thinking breaks down. Again, not a good time to program computer, not a good time to try to play music. You're trapped by this idea, and you cannot get free of it. So what we need to do, is learn to get back into a neutral, positive state, and you can do that by repeating all those things that I always repeat from Might of Thoughts, or having a wish dream, putting your mind at ease and thinking of something that's pleasant. Meditate, listen to music, get out in nature, do exercise. Then you can start to recognize the values and the unvalues. So ideas, IDEAS, have values and unvalues. And the unvalues can take years to change for the better. So you have to recognize, if you have an unvalue, you could say you like drinking too much, and that's an unvalue, and you tend to drink too much under certain conditions. I'm just giving an example. It might require months or years for you to make a change in that unvalue. But we got to work to make changes in those unvalues. We need to also create an evolutive attitude and conform to the evolutive attitude. I talked about that earlier. We need to turn the ideas into ideals, IDEALS, and then we can bring them to fruition. And this whole process creates an inner persistence, and we start to get more educated. Now, thoughts are very interesting because thoughts usually have a goal-oriented flow, and they usually have ideas, and we usually have a reality-oriented conclusion. And you know what's interesting is thinking is an activity, but there's really no consensus on how to define thinking, or even understand thinking. So, again, we have values and unvalues. The unvalues are often related to a psychopath. Okay, we've all been a little bit of a psychopath in our life. And it can take months or years to change these unvalues because they're a character pattern, and like I said, they can be psychopathic in nature. Some of the unvalues of psychopaths incur a lack of logical decisions, lack of rational conduct, a frequent change of sexual partner, boredom, parasitism, manipulative behavior in regard to fellow human beings. That's really a bad thing. I know I think everybody's done that, but you may know a person or come across a person who's very manipulative. Seducing, deluding other human beings. If you have an unvalue, you would really have a huge sense of unfairness. Like maybe, you know how everyone is victimized today? Everyone is so overly concerned about, discrimination, whether it's racial or sexual or whatever. Yet the psychopath will endorse torture. They will be very hateful. They will have no remorse. They won't have deep-reaching thoughts. They will have a lack of empathy. And keep in mind here, there is no room for rationality. Once we get tangled into these irrational, basically wrong, ideational thoughts, virtuelessness is controlling the thoughts. And this is such a typical thing that happens today. And the Washington Examiner is saying, for example, that the violent left is a serious problem. There are articles in the New York Post, one that says, will the Democrats condemn the left's growing to violence? Turn to violence. But I think on both sides of the fence, the left and the right, there is a turning to violence. And I think it's a historical trend that we're living through, and we're starting to see the prophecies coming about. Billy's talked about the coming civil war. I really think if Roger Stone if they actually incarcerate him on these trumped-up charges, that will be the indicator that we're no longer under the rule of law. And then I will be personally very, very certain that we will fall into chaos, and the U.S. will split up. I want to talk quickly about the creational natural laws. What the law of love is. That's the first law. It's the highest form of love. It's called effective love. That's the first creational law. The second law is the law of striving, which is the fundamental law of all evolution. If you don't strive, then you won't have a life. The third law is the law of harmony, which deals with harmony in our thinking, but it's also the bipolar structure of everything that exists. There's a law of prosperity and abundance that says the creation allowed for everything to have plentiful abundance. Now, if we overpopulate, these other laws get sometimes screwed up. Like the law of reincarnation is screwed up now because of overpopulation. The law of universal creation says that every thought that is enlivened by might and power must, as a cause, also bring an effect. And the effect of the thought is directly proportional to its might and power. So the more might and power your thought has, the more intensity, the more effective it is. So I just wanted to make that clearly. And it's directly proportional. The more might and power the thought has. What deals with your feelings as well. Something I probably need to continue to study to understand. Earth-like planets should be at about 500 million. And human population may be as high as 1 billion, but mostly 500 million. And there's another law called the law of growth, which is another one I don't know as well as I would like. The law of growth of the progress seems to say that our inner thoughts lead to our own domination of the external and internal conditions of life. And there is also a law of adaptation, which also seems to say something similar. And both of these are related. That was a very, very quick review of the creational natural laws. I could definitely probably talk about any one of those laws for the rest of the hour here, which we're running out of. I want to read something, if I can, quickly, from the Might of Thoughts. And it's a paragraph that is entitled, What the Truth Knows to Say. And respect or venerability towards the entirety of nature and towards the creation and its laws and recommendations must determine the human being's thoughts and feelings and his or her deeds. So this is a great segue into the second part of the show, because we don't have respect towards nature anymore. Venerability means an admiration. We don't have an admiration towards nature and towards the laws of creation. If we did, then our thoughts and feelings and deeds would be all related to all of that. We human beings must live in harmony with creation, with nature, with earth and the universe, as well as all the varieties of present existence that spring forth from these: rivers, stones, plants, animals, lakes, seas, brooks, springs, the air and water, trees and bushes. Everything that crawls and flies on the earth are life forms with a spirit form, with very many of them connected by psychic swinging waves. All of them are Wesenheiten that communicate with one another, all knowing about their common existence amongst one another. The consciousness and the psyche of all created creations are in turn bound on a journey through time, incorporating very many bodily existences. through the innumerable forms in which life appears. In this process, death is a passage to rebirth, as well as the conversion into the other world, the world of pure spirit. This is the basis for the tightly woven and indissoluble web of all life, and in this wise, no life form strives to rise up over the others within their group. Now, this is something that we humans don't really follow. We always are trying to rise up over others. We want to go up the corporate ladder. We want to, if we're politicians, we want to get all the way to the president. If we're on a sports team, we want to be the one that, is getting the raises and setting the records. We think this is normal. We want to rise up over the others within our group. This is not the way of nature, and it says here, and to set themselves up over the others, because each life form contains a basic goodness and not evil. After all, evil is learned and practiced as a result of inappropriate doings and asartong. Fundamentally, the creational laws and recommendations impose cooperation on all life forms. So we shouldn't be just wiping down a patch of trees because we want to, for example, make sure that they don't affect the power lines. So we cut down hundreds of trees. This is not respect for the web of life. This is what we're dealing with here, is our lack of cooperation on all life forms, according to which every individual must see itself as a valuable building block of the whole in all existence of creation. And this applies to every political, religious, ideological, and philosophical orientation, as well as to the earth, the entire universe, created in accordance with this plan. Now, Billy goes on here, and he talks about fanatical religions and stubborn nationalism and terrorism and neo-capitalism. Mm-hmm. And I believe these are the things that are currently destroying our world. Now, I think we should be getting pretty close to the end of the hour. I think the music has started, so I think we're on break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you. There's a number.
No.
Hey, Frosty, can you join us today? Frosty? Hello? Jump on Skype. Skype. Stephen, do you hear me?
I sure do.
Okay, good. Are we on break still?
Yeah, yep, I'm listening to music right now,
okay.
Or advertising.
Frosty, are you there? I think we're calling Frosty.
Frosty speaking.
Frosty, welcome. I'm so glad I got you.
Yeah, I've been sitting here on the Skype and I'm calling, but it's not answering. So.
Oh no! I call you. So just you're good right now.
Okay,
yeah,
we're good.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why, but you're still ringing. Can you stop?
Yeah, I can. Now it's all set.
Oh, are we good? Stephen, are we connected?
I don't know.
Okay. That's a good question. Hang on. Let me check the
Yeah.
I will check. We may be live right now, guys. We're gonna we love these little transitions. Studio. I'm not sure why, but you're still ringing. Can you stop?
Yeah, I can. Now it's all set.
Are we good? Stephen, are we connected?
You're live now.
Hang on. Let me check the. Well, welcome back to the second hour. We always have this. It's like a rough takeoff or a rough landing. I'm not sure which. But that was a fun first hour. I really enjoyed that. I always like talking about the Meyer information. I got Frosty on here for the second hour, and it's always good to chat with Frosty. Frosty, how are you today?
Doing very well. Happy February right off the bat, coming in so quickly. And obviously, as you look across the globe, and you certainly look across the United States, there's always something exciting. The new governor of Virginia is fighting for his life. I'm in the process right now of writing a new series called The Strange Death of Europe versus the Strange Decay of America. And I'm reading the book, The Strange Death of Europe, Immigration, Identity, and Islam. And it's a book about the self-inflicted suicide of Europe and the Europeans by their leaders. And it's a fascinating book. For those of you who want to read it, I would highly recommend it because it portends exactly what's happening to the United States of America.
Wow.
And Douglas Murray, the writer of the book, gives all the reasons why this onslaught of Europe is occurring, but it's also occurring at the hands of Justin Trudeau right there and his father, Pierre Trudeau, who created the multicultural diversity quagmire that's now affecting Canada. Certainly Australia the same, and here in the United States it's an ongoing challenge, and of course Theresa May in the United Kingdom is continuing to be obsequious and apologetic to what's going on in the United Kingdom, Great Britain. Of course, you're seeing everything boil under the surface. And this Douglas Murray, in his book, A Strange Death of Europe, really tells the story quite abruptly and quite frankly, and it's almost way too sobering to read it, but I also see it happening here in our country, so it'll be fascinating to read the rest of the book.
Personally, I think if Roger Stone is convicted on these silly charges, that will be, for me, the symbol that we are no longer under the rule of law, that our society is going down. Don't know what else I can add to that. That's very...
Well, I would say that there's no question that we're at a loss of due process. And it is fascinating to me and for everyone listening to this broadcast. We have now two Muslim women, one from Michigan and one from Minneapolis, who swore not on the Bible to uphold the United States Constitution, but they swore on the Quran.
Really?
And the Quran... Oh yeah, they swore in on the Quran. Rashida and Omar.
Was this political people?
Yeah, they're both members of the House of Representatives in the United States Congress right now, and both of them swore in on the Quran. And the Quran is mandated to completely overthrow any other form of governance other than the Sharia law. It's a political, religious, and economic system that is absolutely counter to the U.S. Constitution. And they were allowed to swear in on the Quran, which is mandated to destroy the U.S. Constitution. So we have some fascinating situations happening here in the United States, along with what's happening in Canada and certainly what's happening in Europe and Australia.
Is this the first politicians in the U.S. that have sworn in on the Quran?
No, Keith Ellison, also of Minneapolis, who's now the Attorney General in Minnesota, he swore in on the Quran also, and he's also been connected with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a terrorist group, and you're already hearing this lady Omar and also Rashida. She's actually been completely connected to again, Palestine and all that goes with that. It's extraordinary what's going on.
I don't know if you heard about this. This is a little off topic slightly, but Tyson Chicken they called back tens of thousands of pounds of these chicken nuggets that had rubber in them. I don't know if you've heard about this.
I've heard some of that. One of the things that's happening also here in the United States, they're shipping all of the meats over to China, having processing all of the meats, and I don't know about the chicken.
You're really kidding me.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do they send them to China? They're processed in China? And then they send them back?
Yep.
What?
Again, you have to realize that there are 1.4 billion Chinese, and they work at whatever level of scanty, if you will, or very scarce financial remuneration. You know, one of the things that most Americans don't realize is that when you buy such things as the Nike, The Nike brand shoes, the women that are sewing or the men that are sewing those shoes in Thailand and all these other third world countries, they're making about $1 an hour, and they live in concentration camps, and all they do is sit and sew the leather and the goods and everything that makes up a Nike shoe.
Wow.
And then, of course, you pay $100 for that same Nike shoe. In fact, I think some of those shoes are up to $800 a pair. So there's tremendous or injustice going on in the world that most Americans have no clue what's going on.
Well, the world is very strange right now. I don't know if you watch any Fox News or any...
I watch Fox News to get information. I also watch the CNN because I want to see both sides of the story and the different slants and the different prejudice and the different bias. And it's extraordinary to see the differences in these two networks. And then you see the kinds of bias that are going on at ABC and NBC and CBS. But also, as a citizen journalist and who has been watching this for 50 years, I also see the bias and the slant that's going on with the National Public Radio and certainly public, PBS, public broadcasting, that also has its particular slant. And again, just like anything else in history, it's the conquerors who write the history books. So those in power are always the one that write the slant, if you will, or the bias or the prejudice of any kind of a news release, and those who work for them the same way. So you're going to get a different view and a different slant from somebody like Anderson Cooper,
right,
and or opposed to somebody like Tucker Carlson, and or opposed to somebody like Jake Tapper at NBC, or Jonathan Karl, or any of those different kinds of intellectual slants and emotional slants and political slants, or prejudice or bias, if you will, whatever you want to call it.
I talked last show a little bit about Operation Mockingbird, which I don't know that much about, but I think it's still going on. The CIA started back in the 1950s and attempted to manipulate the news for propaganda purposes. And it's gotten so outrageous today. I think there are certain people that are really vulnerable to this, and they cannot even, they don't even question whether what they're hearing is true or not. They accept it, and they have this, have you noticed they're real aggressive and almost violent? Some of them are violent.
Well, there's no question. If you look on all the YouTube videos, and you've got the Antifa that are attacking people, then you have the pro-lifers out there, and then you have they get attacked by the liberals who are, pro-abortion and all that goes with that, and then you have the Black Lives Matter, marching through different cities. You have Louis Farrakhan, who is a Muslim here in the United States, and he's asking for a black African state or country, and his mark is to have South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana as the new black African state for the United States. That was also echoed by the former mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, and he just died 3 years ago from cancer, but he had thousands, if not tens of thousands, of blacks that wanted to make the 5 southern states a new black Africa, and it was spelled America, Amerika. And so again, you're seeing in this country the fragmentation and the fracturing of this country with all these different factions, and it's quite sobering to see firsthand.
Is Louis Farrakhan a Muslim?
Oh, yes, he is. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
He's a Muslim.
I did not know that. Now,
oh yeah, he's one of the. I would say Louis Farrakhan, being a Muslim, and really one of the most vociferous of the Muslims. He's anti-American from A to Z. I mean, if he had the power to do away with America and the U.S. Constitution, he would absolutely do it in a millisecond.
Wow. So is his group called the NOI, something like that? Nation of Islam?
I don't know what is. I don't know. There's so many Islamic groups in this country. There's the Islamic something of America. I mean, there are dozens of Islamic groups in America right now. Pardon me.
And doesn't he have an anti-white theology?
Oh yes, he does. He absolutely is anti-white.
I didn't know that.
And there's a new video out on LeBron James that he absolutely said that he does not hang with white guys. He has no white friends. He doesn't want any white friends, and he is completely anti-white. And that's his. If anybody said that was white in his position, I guarantee you, that's the one thing that's going on in this country today, is that everything is the fault of white people, and white people. You can't have the BET, and that's the Black Entertainment Television. If we had the WET, it would be completely trashed in a heartbeat. If you had the United Negro College Fund, instead was the United White College Fund or Caucasian College Fund, it would be racist as heck. If you had Miss Black America, which we have Miss Black America, but if we had Miss White America, it would be immediately racist. If you have that TV program, which is called Blackish, which is all black, then if we had Whitish, you can imagine the calls for racism, and that would be extinguished. And right now, the governor, his name is Northam. I think it's Northam of Virginia. Somebody discovered a yearbook of his high school, and there was a black face in the high school annual with a Ku Klux Klan robed guy. And it wasn't him, and he said that wasn't me, and this was 50 years ago, and now he's being asked to step down and resign because of a page in a yearbook that he never even saw. He said, "I never even got a yearbook. I didn't even know this thing existed."
Wow!
And so you're seeing, and then there's a new thing for reparations for black slavery in this country I think it's $100 billion. $100 billion should be spread among all of the blacks in America. And then you get on Facebook, and another guy figured up all of the reparations that have been given to blacks since the 1964 Great Society, and the WIC, and the Aid to Dependent Children, and all the welfare and food stamps for blacks. It's well into the trillions of dollars. So in reality, the blacks have been repaid in reparations over the last 50 years since 1964, when the Great Society, started by Lyndon Baines Johnson, came into operation. So again, you're seeing a country like the United States that at one point was 90% white and 7% Hispanic and 7% black and 3% Hispanic, is now literally fracturing and fragmenting, because whites are down to about, I think it's 54%, and will become the new minority by 2042, which is a little over 20 years from now. So it's going to be very interesting and almost frightening. As what's happening is everybody's cutting off their nose to spite their face, and they can't help themselves because it's very tribal. And the same thing's happening there in Europe, and certainly in Australia, and certainly in Canada. So it's beyond, but that's what's happening, and it's rolling right along. And of course, you're going to see more and more conflict as we go into this next 100 million immigrants added to America here in the next 30 years.
I posted a story on my Facebook page about something I read on Bing. It's a Bing search engine, and I read this story about supposedly this white supremacist who killed an old black guy. And someone was triggered because I said the term old black guy, and they said that was one of the most racist things they'd ever heard. How is that racist? I don't get it.
Well, again, you have to understand the slant and the mindset and the worldview of the person who is responding to that. everybody doesn't appreciate or understand the fact that white people are being killed in Africa right now. In South Africa, they're being shot. They've been run off their land, all the farmers, but they're also being shot. And the Africans over in Africa, they have in South Africa, they literally are on course to get rid of all the white people by running them out or killing them. And there's about 4 million whites in South Africa, so anything and everything is on the table right now, and I'm not particularly confident that the white people stand a chance of surviving all of that. And there's a lot of them moving to Australia, they're moving to England, they're even putting in for asylum here in the United States.
And we have to be so careful about what we say, because it can be interpreted as racist when there was absolutely no intention whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
There's no question. The politically correct charges. And again, I want to have everyone understand this. One of the things I've learned in my lifetime as a world traveler is that I respect all races, all colors, all ethnic groups, all languages, because everybody's doing the best they can. And I would, at the same time, I would say that the fact that we've been mixing all these cultures and all these races dramatically here in the 21st century, it's a recipe for a disaster for all of us, because races simply don't get together very well because of biological differences. And those biological differences then erupt into cultural differences. And then there's the intellectual differences, the differences in IQ, 68 IQ compared to a 120 IQ. What kind of commonality does that have? And then IQs that create the cultures, and the cultures that are advanced cultures versus cultures that are something like, say, Somalia, where the culture has literally been completely destroyed anyone's ability to function, because it's absolutely a nightmare over there in Somalia, and everybody would agree with that. Why? Because that's exactly what Somalia is. It's a war-torn, poverty-stricken, overpopulated, warlord kind of situation. Anybody can deny that? Well, go over to Somalia and check it out yourself if you get to live through that particular experience. So then you've got all these mixings, and like I've said in one of my the world's the deadliest birth rate for all humanity, that series that I wrote that I think I've sent to you. Africa right now with 1.1 billion people is going to be 2 billion at current birth rates by 2050, and 4 billion before the end of the century, which is like less than 80 years from now, about 80 years from now. And you see all of these Africans coming over to America with a totally different culture, and they're coming into certainly into Canada and certainly all of Europe, and yet there's no end of the line. So at what point does the host country and all these host countries simply collapse under this massive flood of all this humanity, and certainly this flood of humanity that has no ability to function in a first world country? That's what we're facing, and it's not going to be a pretty picture for anybody. I actually feel sorry for everybody, every race and every color, and certainly these different religions, and especially the Muslim religion, which is compatible to no religion on this planet, because it dictates that it is the single greatest and only religion that anybody can follow on the planet, and it pushes that by the sword. And anybody can tell you that that's exactly what Muslims do. They push everything by the sword, by violence, by terrorism. Even Muhammad, he absolutely terrorized everybody, and again, the quote out of the Quran is, to convert or kill all non-believers, unquote, right out of the Quran. So, yeah, we're living in interesting times.
I read an interesting thing, too, about the airstrikes that we're doing in Somalia, and I just learned about this. I think we just had a Somalian airstrike like 48 kilometers from their capital, and I think we did a half a dozen airstrikes in December. I didn't know about this at all. No one's talking about this, I don't think.
I think it killed 42 people. These latest airstrikes killed 42 people.
How do we justify just doing airstrikes against another country? I don't quite understand the thinking there.
Well, let me always clarify that. The military-industrial complex likes war. loves war. It initiates war. It starts wars, and it carries on wars. And so you tell the home country that, we're going to be attacked, and we're going to have another 9/11, and we got to go over there and we got to just obliterate, X kind of an enemy. Okay, X factor is the Taliban. X factor is the insurgents. X factor, back in the Vietnam War, it was the North Vietnamese, and you could just go on down the line. And again, by the time I was 1968. When I went into the Army in the United States, I was in boot camp in Fort Benning, Georgia. I realized at that point, after all my friends who were getting killed over in Vietnam, that guess what? The United States government is not the wonderful, honest and integrous and all-American apple pie that everybody thinks it is. I have not trusted the U.S. government since 1968, and reason for that is Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers got released there in that time period. All my friends who were getting shot up in Vietnam were writing back letters telling me this was just a farcical war. It was a moneymaker. It was not accomplishing anything except killing a lot of people, and Monsanto was selling a lot of Agent Orange, which we were spraying all over the jungles to defoliate them and then cause all the unbelievable birth defects and killing of people with this horrible, horrible Agent Orange, which of course now we use as Roundup. And so that's what's going on. And the American people, they keep thinking that their government is doing good things. Well, the government is doing nothing over in Afghanistan or Iraq for the last 18 years that's been good. It's just killed a lot of people, and certainly a lot of young soldiers who thought they were actually serving this country when in fact they were serving the military-industrial complex. I'll stand on that. There's no way you can sit there and go, oh no, we're doing something for freedom. What, 10,000 miles away? That's the biggest joke of the 21st century. And especially since Osama bin Laden was killed, 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it's been. We should have left the day after he was killed. We have no reason to be there.
I didn't even really know about these airstrikes in Somalia, and I guess we did like 50 of them last year.
Oh yeah, well, and again, the government is just doing its covert actions. We've got drones going over there doing all the stuff they're doing. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And the federal government, they literally are doing everything under the radar. They'll do everything they can to get away with what they get away with. They get to test all those new weapons out over there, killing people like crazy. And again, all for what? I mean, what really has happened for the last 18 years? Are we a freer country? Have we stopped terrorism? Have we stopped all of those insurgents in that goat herder nation of Afghanistan? No, and some of the other stories that have come out of there is the drug running that's coming back from the Middle East, facilitated by military transport. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and the American people just keep paying for it.
I just feel kind of bad because I'm so ill-informed. I'm not informed about this at all. Now, there is something called the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM. I didn't know anything. I think I've heard that term before, AFRICOM. So there's a whole theater of military strikes going on right now that I was not even really aware of. That's amazing.
Right. Well, again, like when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, and you see what's going on in Chile. The U.S. is down there fiddling with all their elections, and then you go into Panama, and the United States is fiddling with all that. When we think about, they're all crying out how the Russians are affecting our voting here in the last election in 2016 to the presidency.
That's so
It's
silly.
the biggest joke on the face of the planet.
Isn't that ridiculous? That is
It's
so
ridiculous because none of this Russian stuff that Mueller's doing what he's doing with had anything to do with the final outcome of the U.S. elections. We voted in someone against the other.
Right.
And most people voted, Trump in against Hillary because she was a known liar and she was a known everything. I mean, the woman was just corrupt on so many levels. And yet everybody was thinking that, well, she's going to be the first female president. Well, she would have been the biggest, crookedest. She would have been more crooked than Ulysses S. Grant, who was one of the crookedest presidents alive in his time.
I didn't know that.
And so, no, Ulysses S. Grant, his administration was just unbelievable. But
really?
But anyway, so you sit there. Yeah, go back in history. You can look it up.
My God,
but
that's
at
interesting.
the same time,
I love these tangents.
Yeah.
I'll put you on another
right. Well, yeah. Think about LBJ. I mean, that guy was one of the biggest frauds and corrupt presidents of all time himself. I mean, he had ill-gotten gains and kickbacks, and I mean, this goes on and on and on. That's why I say we need in America term limits. We've got to get these corrupt people out to get fresh new faces and fresh new ideas and fresh new people in. But what happens is these people get into Congress, and they don't want to get out of Congress because they get to be as corrupt as the rest of them, and they get to live the high life. I mean, let's face it, those people party down a lot up there, and they go around with their egos, and they go around with their new cars. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is 70, I think she's 78 years old. She's been in for 35, 40 years. And she uses military first-class aircraft, I mean jets, to fly back and forth from her mansion in California to Washington D.C. weekly.
Weekly.
She costs us anytime she wants to procure that military jet, she does. It's on standby and ready to go, and it costs us. I think it costs us something. I know that the jet that takes President Trump around, that's $100,000 an hour.
Wow.
But the one that takes her, I would probably bet, is over $50,000 an hour.
Wow.
And that's what these people get into these positions, and they are the chosen aristocracy. Mark, it's just, I mean, the American people don't know what they're doing their 8 hours a day for, but I'll tell you what, it's for unbelievable corruption there in Washington, D.C. In my latest piece, I really exposed a lot of that, and I said we should fire all these people immediately, and starting with Mitch McConnell. I mean, he's on the Republican side. You know, E-Verify has been squashed for 20 years by Mitch McConnell, certainly Paul Ryan, certainly by Boehner, Speaker John Boehner when he was in, because these people really don't want this illegal alien impact to stop. They absolutely are doing everything they can to keep it coming, and that's just undercutting all American citizens and our tax dollars. We're paying for all those children of those illegals. We're paying for all the medical care. We're paying for the anchor babies. None of this has been stopped. Why? Because those people in Congress are so unbelievably deceitful, and they're so unbelievably corrupt. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
Isn't there a couple more caravans of immigrants coming up? There's a couple more headed this way.
I understand. One of them's worth 12,000. 12,000 people are coming up on that caravan.
My good. So somebody is paying for this. They're not all walking. I mean, these people are getting drove by.
Oh yeah, they're getting bus rides. They're getting truck rides. They're putting them in the cattle cars. Yeah, the whole thing is just completely engineered.
So,
and I tell you, we're the ones going to be paying for it.
So that's what we need to figure out. I mean, if we need to do military strikes, we need to do military strikes against the people that are organizing what is essentially an invasion of the United States, right?
Well, that's right. You know, and until enough Americans, it's like over in France in the last month, the yellow vests were, by the tens of thousands, were absolutely standing up against all of this unbelievable stuff that's going on. And unfortunately, France is pretty well lost. I mean, there's over 6 million Muslims in that country, and they're taking over everything. The no-go zones, the honor killings, the female genital mutilation, the synagogues that are being completely destroyed, the Jewish people who are being run out of France. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And they're pretty much, that's it. They waited too late. Same thing in Sweden, even in Norway. And I think the same thing is going to continue here in the United States. We're just simply going to continue to watch this invasion of our country, and until it really gets into your front doorstep and your community is destroyed, most Americans won't do anything. I thought 20 years ago, when I jumped into this thing even more than I had 30 years ago, well, we're gonna save ourselves. And actually, nope, we're not going to save ourselves, because the American people just accept, or they pretend that their elected officials are going to do something that's going to be good for the American people, but in fact, they're doing the elected officials, the 100 senators and the 435 reps are not, the majority of them, the vast majority of them are not doing anything to stop this.
What are your thoughts on George Soros?
Well, you know, he's a billionaire that came to America, made all his money, and now he's working to destroy America. He's literally behind all of this immigration invasion, and it's been proven. And he's untouchable. He's a multi-billionaire, and money always protects. And so he doesn't have to worry about a thing. He's like an Osama bin Laden, using money and power of money to disrupt the American political system. And he's got the money to do it, and he can stand off and watch. And why he wants to do that? You know, one of the things, Mark, that really, and here, again, I'm 72 years old, and I got to watch this, and I got to see it from the inside out, from the military as a United States Army officer, certainly as a student, demonstrating in streets and watching the Vietnam War. I was right next to the Kent State killings. I mean, they were just south of me there in Ohio. And you sit there and you see all this stuff, and you really start to realize what your own country and the leaders of your own country are. I wouldn't trust a single CIA agent to save my life. The FBI's got more corruption than that thing going on. It's just unbelievable. And so what we have to do is do the best we can and maintain our own integrity and maintain our own communities. And it's so fun. As a matter of fact, I was at the Natural Grocers up in Bergen Park, and anyway, Bergen Park in Evergreen, Colorado, is virtually all white, and it's all white because it's very expensive to live there, so minorities can't get there. And some gal came up there to give a lecture on food today, and good eating. It's called the ketogenics diet. And because we got so many fat Americans, and everybody there was fat, and they wanted to lose weight by this ketogenics diet, and it's pretty good, actually. I've read it, and so anyway, she said, "Boy, it's just not too many minorities here." And I said, "Well, yeah, this is kind of this is a ethnically white arena, but it's also it's financially selective, and it's racist, because the whites here really don't want to have a bunch of minorities in here." And she says, "Well, that's too bad." And I said, if you really want to have some multiculturalism, and she was from Australia, and you want to have more multiculturalism and diversity, I mean, just go down to Colfax right there in downtown Denver, and you'll get plenty of diversity. And she says, "Yeah, but that's it's pretty violent down there. It's pretty crime is everywhere." I said, "Well, that's a part of diversity and multiculturalism. If you want that, that's what you're going to get." And she kind of didn't know what to do with that, So what do you do? I mean, I just stated the facts, and then she could hardly handle it. It's funny. People that love multiculturalism and diversity, it's like in Boulder, Colorado, where I used to teach school. They wanted all the multiculturalism, want all diversity, and want all the little Spanish kids, and want all the little Muslim kids, and they want to have all the Arabic come in and all this, and this is going to be a happy pie, except all the rich people that had their kids in those schools. It was called white flight. It was reported by the Denver Post. They were all SUVing all of their kids to the predominantly white schools to get away from all the diversity and multiculturalism near the trailer parks, like Mapleton, which I had taught at Mapleton, and they were just literally white women taking and getting their kids out of those ghettos, because they wanted to have their kids have an education. Because what happens when you have all this multiculturalism and diversity is the school is completely paralyzed, because everybody speaks a different language. And I don't know if I've said this before, but in Denver public schools, we have tremendous multiculturalism and tremendous diversity. And in fact, in Denver public schools, an average flunk-out rate of between 50 and 67%, and 173 different languages. So talk about sobering you up as to multiculturalism and what it really means.
You mentioned something there that I think is really important and very interesting, and it takes us off our normal topic a little bit, but you talked about the ketogenics diet. And I've heard that you should fast or do partial fasts on a somewhat regular basis. In other words, your body should feel hungry each day. Like you should experience that hunger. Can you comment on that?
That's very true. As a matter of fact, I actually practice that myself. I guess you could all look at me on my Facebook page and everything. Being 72, most people have mistaken me for 55 because I fast about 14 to 16 hours a day. My dinner is usually finished by around 6, and then I don't eat until around 11 o'clock after I work out the next day. So I'm fasting well over 14, 15, 16 hours. And one of the things, and I take 2 big glasses of drinking water every morning to flush out the system and give the bloodstream a complete flush, if you will. And that's important, and most people don't do that. And so this ketogenics diet actually has people fasting for 2 days. I've actually fasted for 8 days once in my life just to see what it was like, and it certainly was a different emotional, mental journey, even a spiritual journey, if you will. But, in this country, unfortunately, 7 out of 10 Americans are of fat, and half of those are obese. And when I mean by fat, anywhere from 30 to 40, even 50 pounds. And then you start getting grossly obese, you're talking, 80, 90, 100, 120, 50 pounds overweight. And the tragedy is their lives are just plain tragic because they have heart disease, they've got knees, they can't walk, they're bedridden, they got diabetes, they've got strokes. I mean, it's just horrible. And it's unbelievable and the reason is because everybody is eating all of the garbage food from Big Macs and certainly McDonald's is just a garbage what is that Frosties or whatever the
Wendy's
pizza joints. I mean, somebody serves a Frosty. What's that guy?
Wendy's does.
Wendy's. And then you go to Chicken McNuggets and you go to KFC. That food is filled with chemicals and crap, trans fats. I mean, I have not stepped foot in any one of those places in well since 1971, but when I became a vegan. But the tragedy is the American people just don't know what's killing them, and they're so used to this new paradigm of fast food, that's absolutely completely ruining their guts, and it's putting the pounds on, and they just don't know anything else. And of course, then they get the diet Jenny Craig, and then they get Weight Watchers, and they get Slim Fast and all that. What they really need to do is simply stay with vegetables and stay away from all of the junk foods and eat a basic, standard, decent, nutritionally sound eating pattern. And they can't. They don't know how to get out of what they're doing. For anybody who appreciates that, I would certainly the Ketogenics book. It's $19. I'd recommend getting it. It's by a guy named Sisson, I think it is.
I've heard that fasting can actually increase your lifespan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I really think I have a very good chance of making it to 90 when I've already had one brother die and another one have a stroke at the age of 50 and 55. And so here I am. I just went skiing all day yesterday, and I just go screaming through the bumps like a doggone 21-year-old. So it can make a difference, and you can be slim and trim. I would highly recommend. In fact, my wife just got back from her ketogenics seminar down there at Natural Foods. The biggest thing most people can do, the best way they can eat, just go into the produce section and eat out of the produce and fruit section. Fruit and produce, and avoid dairy products at all costs. And if you got to have cheese, go to vegan cheese. If you got to have milk, go to almond milk. Go to rice milk. Go to coconut milk. Go to hemp milk. There's all sorts of milks. You do not need to drink dairy milk, and you don't need to eat butter. You can always do the alternatives, and you certainly don't need to be eating ice cream every night, and you don't want to eat cheese at all. And milk is diametrically opposed molecularly to human milk. And in fact, if you wanted to really drink milk or drink, you should be drinking the best thing. The alternative would be goat's milk. Goat's milk is actually closer to human milk. But again, I'd stay away from all milk from other animals. You don't need to be drinking somebody other animal's milk. You need to be drinking healthy something, and that's, again.
If you think about that logically, it's kind of sick and weird if you think about it. We're taking and drinking the milk of an animal that should be given to its young. That's odd. That's bizarre, actually.
Well, it is bizarre. What I always tell people when I give my seminar, How to Regain, Sustain, and Maintain Optimum Health Past 50, 60, 70, 80, when I give that seminar, and based on all my experiences as a cardiac catheterization med tech and a medical service corps officer, et cetera, just think of milk and think of cheese and think of butter as cow pus, because all it is hardened milk. That's all it is.
Oh no, that's a horrible way to think of it. You're kidding.
Well, yeah, but if you can get that in your mind, that every time you're drinking milk, it's cow pus. If you're eating cheese, it's hardened cow pus. Butter is hardened cow pus. Ice cream is hardened cow pus.
Oh no.
Yogurt is also hardened cow pus. Yeah, I know it sounds a little bit, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Well, yeah, you're right. It is. It's very unhealthy for you. So if that helps you avoid anything dairy, then I highly go for it and change over to almond milk, because almond milk is really good for you.
My goodness. Did you hear about Tyson? I brought this up at the very beginning of the show, the Tyson Chicken McNuggets recall. They had rubber in it.
Oh, yeah.
Rubber.
Yeah. Again, you have to look at the FDA. You got to look at buy-offs. You got to know that everybody was looking the other way when Hormel Foods out of Minneapolis or out of Minnesota, Hormel Foods, they were hiring illegal aliens. And they displaced all of the American workers there at Hormel Foods. Well, the same thing at Tyson Chicken and all. And when you start getting third world people, then third world supervisors, guess what they do? They get bought off. They get bribed. Because corruption is a mechanism by which a third world country operates. And I want everybody to understand that. I've been through all these third world countries. Corruption is a mechanism by which third world countries operate. So when you have enough corrupt third world people in our country and they move right into the systems themselves, they then corrupt those systems so that the inspectors are now corrupted. So then there's cancer in the meats or there's feces in the meats. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Everything that looks so wonderful there underneath that plastic at your local Kroger's or your Safeways or your King Soopers or whatever, Publix, it's pretty ugly what is actually going on, because some of the great studies, I think it's Consumer Reports has shown that there's fecal matter in just about every package of meat that you have in the grocery stores. Oh, yeah. I mean, look it up. Look it up, and you'll see the studies on that. I was appalled when I saw one of the YouTube studies that showed the fecal matter that's put into the packages of pork and certainly of steaks and hamburger and everything on. You got to figure. I mean, those people that are on the line there, they're just illiterate third world people, and they're the ones that are taking care of those chickens for you. And they're, it's like third world people, they go to the bathroom and they throw their toilet paper in the box and they never wash their hands. Because why? Because third world people don't wash their hands. That's what they do. So they come up here and they're working at McDonald's or they're working at Burger King or they're working at Pizza Hut or wherever they're working. They don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom, and then they're cutting up your onions and they're cutting up your tomatoes. That's just the way it is, and that's why I say I don't go to third world. I don't go to a fast food joints. I don't do it.
Let me read this. This is from March 23rd, 2012. It says the most recent NARMS retail meat report stated 90% of pork and 95% of chicken breasts were contaminated with fecal bacteria.
Did I tell you what I just said?
I know. And it also says here, there's USDA inspectors admit to poop, hair, toenails in factory pork. Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. Well, and again, the reason I know all this is because I've reported on it. When you do the kind of research that I do, and that is a citizen journalist, I go out there and I just I just look at it, and then I research it, and I find exactly what you just found, and I report it. But 90+% of the American public does not know that their meat sources and their chicken and their pork and all the other sources are so contaminated. Most people don't realize that the salmon that is farm-fed salmon it's contaminated with all sorts of chemicals. And I've seen the big salmon farms over in the North Sea off of Norway, and they feed them human contrived food. These salmon aren't getting real food. And then they're also getting all the contaminants of the oceans now because, again, as I've said in the past, the Mississippi River has a 10,000 square mile dead zone where it kicks out all those poisons. Those poisons run all over the world. But then you got the 20,000 mile, the Lima River coming out of Lima, Peru. I was on that river. It is a filthy sewer pipe. It's got fecal. It's got everybody that's crapping in it and urinating in it and throwing garbage and filth and chemicals and crap. Well, the Yangtze River has a 20,000 square mile dead zone, and the Ganges out of India. But every river flowing out of all these countries around the world, the Thames River out of England, that's contaminated. The Rhine River coming out of Europe, it flows into two other rivers, and it's contaminated, and it goes into the North Sea. I'm telling you, we are contaminating this planet at a horrific amount of speed. It just takes my breath away.
Isn't there a specific kind of insect that consumes and redigests the feces of some of these large animals? I don't know if you've ever done any research on that. The dung beetle, and certain things like that.
Yeah, there's a dung beetle that'll go after the turds of all the different like elephants out there in Africa and so forth. There's always some animal that breaks down all of the feces, but when it gets into the rivers, and when it gets, all the Chinese, and the Indians, they all flush their toilets right directly into those big rivers, and there's so much of it. I mean, there's 1.4 billion Chinese and 1.25 billion Indians. There's so much fecal matter. As I told you before, 60% of Indians don't have access to a toilet. Guess what? It goes into the river systems. And in the end, we're going to be eating all that stuff if you're eating a salmon or a tuna or a swordfish or any of the creatures that are out there in the oceans.
I've heard that ground beef now harbors 5 kinds of bacteria that can cause food poisoning.
Oh yeah, now you're kind of. I'm writing down as our conversation goes along, and that is, I will look up what kind of bacteria is now being, presented in all of this beef, and or the chicken that's coming out into the to the American public.
And really,
and then how many people have gotten sick? I'll have to look that up. And do a research on it.
And the reason they're doing this is because there are so many people. We have to do these large animal factory farming things because if we fed these animals correctly, they would have to be given acres. Like I've said, one cow needs 2 acres of grass. And right. We can't afford the space because the population, we would need, like I did in my calculations earlier in the show, not this show, but earlier in other shows, it would be like 14 billion acres to just, give everyone a little bit of beef. It's
right.
Outrageous,
Personally, I like to give everybody, an acre of broccoli and chard and cabbage,
sure,
and carrots and radishes and arugula, and all of the, apples and oranges and cherries and blackberries. And obviously some grains that are good for them. Mm-hmm. The more you can eat closer to the earth, the better off you are. The more you eat away from the earth, such as things that are in glass bottles, things that are in cans, things that are in plastic, things that are in boxes. You cannot pronounce most of the words that of all the ingredients that are in all. In fact, just last week I wrote Sunsweet prunes and said, quit adding high fructose corn syrup to your glass prunes, because prunes are good for you. They're high fiber, and they're very, very, very good for your whole colon and industrial, your intestinal tract. And I said, you're feeding us GMOs. That's what high fructose corn syrup is, and it's deleterious to our systems. Quit poisoning us and pretending that you're presenting us with the healthy prunes. I'll be curious what kind of a note I get back from them, because I actually give them a self-addressed envelope, which would urge them to at least answer me. But most of the time, these big organizations, they just don't care what's happening to the people who buy their products.
So our current system of factory farming is poisoning the population, right?
Oh! Anybody think that you're getting a decent meal, a nutritious meal from McDonald's? I mean, come on. What a joke. It's all chemicalized. It's all pre-processed. It's got all the chemicals in it. It's got trans fats. I mean, and does it have roughage? Oh, my gosh. Anything, they might have a little sliver of lettuce and a couple of onions on their hamburger, but the hamburger itself is a giant chemical pie, and you're getting to eat it.
And there's a relationship between eating some of this bad meat and our heart problems?
Oh, totally. Again, everybody thinks it's, that a pizza is a staple, food group. You've got to be out of your mind. Again, you're eating a giant plate of cow pus, and then it's hardened, and then it goes in and it clogs your arteries. It greases up your blood, and it oils up your bloodstream, slows down the blood. It takes away the efficiency of the blood. Yeah, pizza is not what you want to eat.
Is it because of the cheese?
Yeah, okay, let me give you an example. Okay, they're called triglycerides or fats, and cheese is the most concentrated fats you can put into your system. It's like if you drink a glass of milk, within literally 15 minutes, you will begin to cloud up or triglyceride. It's called cell aggregation. The red blood cells are clumped together when they should be exploding away from each other and bouncing off and just flowing, down the arteries and into the veins and all that goes with that into the capillaries. And so when you're young and you have a cholesterol level of 100, which is a minimum, you have your blood is like is like Rocky Mountain whitewater. It's flying through the arteries and the veins. It's energized. It's clean. It's fresh. It's feeding oxygen, taking off the garbage. It's putting food into the cells, and everything's great. That's why you have so much energy when you're young. But here in America, by the time you're 40, you've got a 20, 30, 40-pound pot belly on you. Your triglycerides, your cholesterol went from 100 to well over 250, even up to 350, 400. And your triglycerides, which should be somewhere around 30, 35 to 50 max, they're exploded up to 250, 300. Now that means your blood is now changed to Mississippi River sludge, because all of the triglycerides, the fats, the oils have now conglomerated or aggregated. They clump together, so your blood turns to Mississippi River sludge, and it's deoxygenated, it's slow-moving, it's dirty, it's filthy, it's got junk in it, and it doesn't give the oxygen off effectively, so you're tired all the time. So then what do? Well, you take an upper, like a coffee. Coffee just zips you up, or you drink a Mountain Dew, or you drink a Coke, and boy, you just feel happy because you're just all fired up. Or you get a Red Bull. And Red Bull, those things can kill you. And they do. They have. It's been proven. Teenagers have died from Red Bull overdoses. And so that's what's happening in this country. So then you get hyped up on the soda pop, and yet your blood is still a Mississippi River sludge, and you're sitting there eating a Dorito, which is a genetically modified corn, and it's poisoning your stomach. I'm telling you, the more you know about this, you just go, oh my God. I would imagine everyone listening to this, this broadcast is probably now really going to organic, natural foods and eating out of the organic section. And even places like Walmart is offering organic bananas, organic chard, kale, cabbage, beets, and all of the good things that really do things for you.
Okay. Frosty, I hate to interrupt you. We are out of time. Yeah. Thank you for another great show. Have a good day.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.